Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to help you distinguish between a good leg day and a bad leg day. I've already attempted the exercise with back days and arm days, videos that you can find in the description, and I'm going to follow the same principles, meaning that in the description along with these videos you will also be able to find examples written down of good and bad templates that you can then apply to your training. And I'm going to of course also include the skeleton for the people who are more advanced in programming and who want to do things by themselves. They just want a guide. I will provide that for you. But today, let's discuss and think about the very idea of a leg day, because it is already part of fitness culture to discuss training sessions as body parts, which is a direct heritage from bro splits, and the most infamous of these days is the leg day. You have people who say that leg day is the worst. You have the other crew that says, oh no, leg day is the best. And you have multiple ways that people go about it, but I have found that there are certain ways that are widely spread that are just downright terrible and make no sense. So I want to make sure you don't fall into that, because most likely if you have a leg day, this means you have an interest towards growing your legs. And if you do it the way these people have been doing it for decades, you're never going to get there. So let's think about it. First off, I think the very idea of a leg day is sort of ridiculous, at least the way people think about it, because it is impossible to just train your legs. And if you attempt to do that, you're going to end up with a shitty day. So let me be clear right now. When I say leg day, I mean a day dedicated to the growth of the lower body in general, with an emphasis on the quads and the hamstrings. That to me is a leg day. But for me, when I program my gentleman split, I don't think of it like this, because I believe that the very approach of the leg day is misguiding. So be very careful, because an isolation approach does not work for a muscle and an amalgamation of muscles such as the legs, because it is truly too difficult to isolate. And on top of that, you will find out that you really don't want to isolate your legs. They work as a compendium, and that is the beauty of it, because you will find that when you transcend the concept of leg day, you get much more bangs for your buck, you save time, and you also prevent injuries. So let's look at a bad leg day. What would be a bad leg day? A bad leg day is you come in and you're going to start by something like a leg extension or a hamstring curl. That is already a big mistake. You are training the portion of the body that is the strongest, the most resilient, and that can move the most weight. Do not start with an isolation. You can sort of explain it if you want to warm up, but you would be better off just doing the movement with less weight if you wanted to warm up. So that is already a no-no. Do not do that. I'm not saying don't do these isolation movements for the leg, but never open a session with it. You open always with a heavy lift. Heavy being, of course, relative to your strength and your goals in terms of intensity. So you're going to open with one of two things, either a heavy knee flexion or a heavy hip hinge. I personally, when I discuss leg days, have a tendency to think of them as more knee flexion focused, because in my personal gentleman split, I separate hip hinges and knee flexions in terms of intensity, so I never have the two happen on the same day, which means that one has to fall somewhere and the other somewhere else. And for me, the heavy hip hinge is always falling on the back day, as I explained to you in my back day video, and the heavy knee flexion happens to fall on the leg day, because that's what makes the most sense. So you open with a heavy knee flexion, for example, and you're going to do from 1 to 3 to 4 sets of this. And when you're done with that, you've already done 70% of the work, because you are going to be exhausted at this point. And by exhausted, I don't mean sore, I don't mean out of breath, I mean that your baseline has been hit. You have damaged the muscle fibers of the legs, the glutes, and the lower back to some extent. And therefore, you have accomplished your mission. You have worked your legs. It's as simple as that. I see too many people who train their legs as if they were marathon runners, where they're going to do 50 sets and 10, they're going to do 50 reps, 10 sets. There's really no point. There's just 1 to 3 sets with high intensity that gets you to failure with a relevant intensity window, as I said, and you're Gucci. You took care of that exercise. If you want to do more, you can do 2 to 3 back-off sets of that same movement pattern, but after that, you're done. So when I see people who do leg press, then leg extension, then single leg presses, then some sort of lunges, then reverse lunges, then back to leg extensions, all of that is junk volume. It's just a gigantic waste of time. And I find that many people who train like this do so because they're trying to avoid the pain of intensity. They would much rather spend an hour and a half, 2 hours just doing in reality some sort of weird aerobic movements rather than just get it done in 45 minutes, because those 45 minutes are going to be very painful. But keep in mind one thing: if done properly, heavy lower body training is not dangerous. It has never been dangerous. And therefore, you don't need to be afraid of that. This is not the risk that you incur. The problem is mostly going to happen if you fall into another pitfall of the bad leg day, which is that you have too low of a frequency, which means that you are constantly in a state of neurological adaptation on the movement. That is when you run into issues, because a lot of people train legs once a week, and that is not acceptable. Even if you're a novice, once a week is not enough. At least 2 times a week is the very minimal if you want to grow your legs. Because if you train your legs once a week, what happens? Every single time you train, you shock your legs in a sense. You know, people who say shocking the muscle, which really just means that the legs are not used to what you're making them do. So what do? They get sore. Getting sore is not a response that is correlated with muscle growth. It, however, is a sign of undertraining and of misadaptation, in a sense, to the movement. And so they get sore. It creates a bad relationship with the very concept of leg day, meaning that they also skip it, meaning that when they actually do their legs, they get even more sore, and so they never get anything done, because every single new leg day is that experience that is not pleasurable, not fun, and that gets them nowhere. And a lot of the time, these guys again end up being the guys with a laundry list of exercises for their legs. I've said it in the past. Your upper body days should be always longer in terms of exercise selection than your leg days, for one simple reason. And by leg days, I mean also your back days, because it's also a lower day. For one simple reason: look at the muscle of the leg and look at the exercise that hits all of that muscle, and then look at the muscles of the upper body. The upper body has much more small muscle groups that are going to be needed to be hit with certain specific exercises. So it makes sense that there would be more exercises on the upper body. But in terms of raw tonnage, the lower body days are going to be dominant because you're stronger on lower body lifts, and that also makes a ton of sense. So you do that. You shrink it. Yes, I'm telling you to apply minimalism to your training. For lower body and leg day, you should, because a good leg day is minimalist in nature, but not necessarily in its complete application. And you'll understand why I say that. So you do your heavy knee flexion instead of doing 15 exercises for the quads. After that, you're not necessarily done. You could do a hip hinge, because as I told you, you're going to still have some energy. Yes, you work the legs and you're fatigued in terms of baseline and muscular endurance, but the movement pattern is what you trained. You might have warmed up other areas that now can get hit, aka the hamstring. So for example, it's something that I've said a lot: a heavy squat, any type you like, followed by a Romanian deadlift is amazing. It's a match made in heaven, because the two complement each other. And so you're going to really hit a complete development of the posterior chain and the leg. And that, to me, is 90%. So your 3 heavy sets of knee flexions, 3 to 4 mild to heavy set of Romanian deadlifts, 6 to 12 reps that I'm going to include in the description, and you're pretty much covered. Your glutes have been worked, your quads have been worked, your hamstrings have been worked, your lower back has been worked. In reality, there is absolutely no need for isolation after that. It doesn't mean that you cannot include it, but it cannot replace those heavy movements. Because again, if you put them in the balance, what is better? 4 sets of Romanian deadlift, or 4 sets of hamstring curl and 4 sets of Nordic curls? Romanian deadlift, always. And then you can complement if you need, but you will find that by espousing those heavy movements first, it reduces the need for the isolation, and a lot of the time you won't even have energy for the isolation, so you will be good. But if you do have that energy, that comes later. You did your 2 movements that couldn't really be supersetted. I recommend you don't superset the heavy knee flexion that opens the day. The remaining deadlift could be supersetted. That in reality it could. Maybe with chin-ups, maybe with shrugs, maybe with calves, maybe with some type of real dart exercise. You can really go crazy with that. It all depends on your work capacity. And then we enter the world of giant sets. Because in reality, all of these isolation exercises that you see pro bodybuilders do, especially, which, by the way, are the culprits to point at when it comes to the terrible culture that surrounds leg days. Because they're the ones who do all of these exercises, and maybe it works for them, but it certainly doesn't work for naturals. When you are at that point, now you can start talking about those isolation movements. Now they can actually be implemented. But you're not going to just do a set of leg extensions and then sit on your ass for 3 minutes. That's a complete waste of time. A leg extension does not justify rest, at least in terms of total body capacity. It just means that you're going to rest the quads. So you could do leg extensions followed by hamstring curls, followed by calves, by some type of shrugs, by some type of even upper back movement if you wanted. All in a giant set. That way you're actually going to get your work capacity up and you won't waste any time. And that could just end the day right there and you could go home. And that to me is a good leg day right there. It's very simple, it's very compact, and it takes care of everything at once. And the good thing and the beauty of this is that it offers enough volume for growth, but it's not something that is going to put you in a hole like most of these leg days that I said, that have you in pain for 5-6 days, not just from the low frequency, but also from the very high volume. Volume, might I add, that is completely junked, because most of the stuff you do in this program really do nothing for you, because you're already at a stage where you're past any type of baseline or recovery in terms of muscular development. So you're just wasting your time. And in which case, it would be so much better to just split that day into 3 different sessions in the week that would get you tremendously more gains for the reasons I just exposed. Because now, not only do you do less, you have more time to recover in between, you're more frequently in the gym training the legs, but on top of that, any and all exercises you do in the day matter because they can be recovered from and transform the muscles of the leg into bigger versions of themselves. And that's what we want when we do leg days. So that's already a very good approach and idea of bad versus good leg day. And I think you see the difference here. But now we can go even further, focusing on the template of the good leg day. Because as I said, it's minimalistic in nature. And the beauty of minimalism is that it opens up space for other stuff. The problem with the very concept of always reducing things is that you reduce to actually create space for something else. If you want a minimalist lifestyle in terms of, I don't know, your living room or your living environment, it's to make more space for your peace of mind. So you did actually create room for something else. In your program, that room could be for athletic training if you wanted, but it could also be for something else, and that something else could be other muscle groups. And this is why I told you that the very concept of pure leg day I don't like. Because if there is a space in the program where you can put other muscle groups that need to be worked, it's on these days. People who never work their calves, train them on leg day. People who want time to train their neck and never find it, that's on leg day. Same for the traps and every small muscle groups you can find. The abs, okay, you destroyed your abs with your heavy bracing before the lower body movements. Guess what? All of that bracing can be complemented with stretches. What if you did some leg raises? What if you got on a decline bench and you did crunches? You want a nice six-pack? That's the way to do it. That's a complete core workout, and then you're done, you're good. For all of the people who wonder, where do I place my ab training? That's right there on the leg day because it makes the most sense. But to go back on what I just said, for people who are more athletic and who want also to be able to have movements that carry over to their practice, well, it goes there as well. You are going to do these movements in a fatigued state, meaning that you can do them with less weight and get better results because your baseline is already low enough that it's not junk volume, but it's still very challenging. So all of your unilateral movements, they take space and they take place after the heavy knee flexion and hip hinges. That also makes a ton of sense. You're not doing these movements for PRs. You're not doing these movements to get crazy intensity on them because they're usually done with higher reps and more control and focus because they are unilateral. So they find their place there. Instead of doing leg extension, which is really not that good for athletes, do your unilateral movement at this very moment and place. If you want to learn more about that strategy, again, there's a video in the description called Level Up Your Legs that treats that very topic at the end of the segment. And so that to me is the epitome of the separation between a good and a bad leg day. A good leg day is sustainable. It's something you can do several times a week, and it's something that works hand in hand with a back day. Because when you program a leg day, you need to keep an eye on the back day, because the back day also works the lower body if you do it properly. So you want the two to complement themselves. And if you program properly, you will find that not only are they not going to be predatory to one another, they're going to help one another. It's going to be double progression on different movements, because every single lower body movement exists within the same line of specificity. Some are close, some are away, but at the end of the day, it trains the posterior chain, trains the lower back. It's going to develop your ability to move weight with your legs. So keep an eye on that. And you find also that, again, with that very good concept of the leg day, it's sustainable, and it's something that is never going to create any injury or any relevant amount of damage, pain, or soreness that is going to make the rest of your life miserable. Feeling sore for 7 days after a leg day is a terrible sign. Unless you're a complete noob, it's the sign that there is a problem with your frequency. So you need to fix that first and foremost. But I think that now you have enough material to work with that you're going to be able to program a solid leg day for yourself. And again, if you want a visual template, refer to the description. I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.